Good afternoon, everyone, and thank you for joining GHF with our monthly live conversation. This month, we are highlighting Pride, and we're also highlighting Men's Health Month. And with us to have this conversation are two special guests that we'll be talking to and introducing momentarily. The purpose of this live is to get information out to you all, to discuss the highlighted topic, and to also provide any resources to you guys so it can be beneficial and so you can get all of the information that you need. Any information and resources that we talk about today will be posted in the chat, and it will also be saved in the video for later if you need to go back and review it. As a result of this video and this conversation, we want people to begin to have conversations surrounding pride. How can you be an ally, or even what does it look like to be comfortable and being proud? And those are the types of conversations that we're actually going to have today. Let me tell you a little bit about GHF right quick. GHF is a nonpartisan, nonprofit organization, and we work statewide on consumer health policies and advocacy issues. We are also the voice for Georgia health consumers as state leaders make decisions that affect the health care of all Georgians. My name is Traylon, and I will be your moderator for today. Also with us, we have Nathan Townsend, and we also have George Daigle. Before we get into the introductions of these guys, I want to give you all a little background information about Pride. So, how did Pride get started? LGBTQIA plus Pride dates all the way back to 1969, when the community had enough and was driven to action. Do we all know what that particular event was? If you don't, let me tell you. It was the event called Stonewall.
Yeah.
A very, very groundbreaking and historical event that changed the path for our community today. On June 29th, 1969, police raided Stonewall Inn Bar in New York City's Greenwich Village. I hate reading, guys, but I want to make sure that I get this out. The raid resulted in a 6-day protest and a community uprising between the New York City police and the community. The raid began as an illegal alcohol sales enforcement, and the officers entered under that premise. From that night, protests began and the community was committed to fighting back. Following that same date, followed the next year, June 28th, was the first Pride event since the Stonewall riots. So now that I've given you guys a little history, let me introduce my guest to you. My first guest is Nathan Townsend. Nathan, tell us a little bit about yourself.
So my name is Nathan Townsend. I'm a transplant to Atlanta from Philadelphia. I moved here about 4 or 5 years ago. And in Philadelphia, I was a fashion designer, a caterer. I actually had my own CD. But more importantly, I've been an activist, an HIV activist and a sexual health educator for, I guess, 15 or 20 years. And so much of my heart is grounded in helping our community, as you say, achieve health equity and then also address other disparities and especially for marginalized populations.
Okay, thank you. So let me begin by asking you, what are your pronouns? And do you identify as an ally or a member of the LGBTQ community?
As a member. And so my pronouns are he, him, his.
Okay, thank you for that. We also have George Daigle. George, tell us a little bit about yourself.
Well, I am like Nathan. I am a transplant. I am originally from Louisiana, but I've been here since 2004 in Atlanta. My background is in radio. That's what I've done for 20 plus years, being in media, doing voiceovers, but especially radio. That is my love. And as we all know, radio is the conduit through which most of the African-American community and people of color get their news, get their entertainment, get their insight. And so working in radio, I know is a tentacle or a way to reach our community and get them the information that they know, especially from our station and from a perspective of the LGBT community. So that's just a little bit about me.
Well, thank you and welcome, guys.
Thank
So
you.
Nathan, back to you, Nathan. Let's jump right into it. We are discussing pride. And so I would just like to ask you, as a seasoned member of our community,
Love that word.
continuing with this discussion in pride of pride in Stonewall Tale, what did that era and that time represent for you? And why is it even important to highlight pride and make a month celebration out of it?
So for me, it represents validation. It represents liberation. It represents emancipation. It represents all of the taboos that we were not allowed to acknowledge our own self-expression. We were not able to live in our authenticity, and we were not promoted or nurtured into our lifestyles. You know, we look at our heterosexual brothers and sisters, they have clear, distinct paths laid out for them, you know, by their parents, by their culture, by society. Whereas same gender loving individuals are shunned, put in the closet, and denied the basic freedom of celebrating our uniqueness. And so pride to me is that acknowledgement, that statement, that opportunity to freely be who I was meant and developed and purposed to be. Because I believe, as the songwriter says, I was born this way.
This way. You love it.
I'll stop
Love it.
right
Love
there.
it. Love it.
I'll
Love
stop
it.
right
Love it.
there. I was born this way. I'm not a mistake. I don't need to apologize. I don't even need to give an excuse or an explanation for who I am.
So let's have a real conversation here.
Mhm.
So what would you say to the naysayers who have commentary about pride and it being highlighted and questioning why does there even have to be a highlighted moment for the community?
Well, because there's so many layers in the community, intersectionalities in the community that still are opposing our right for self-expression, our right to be here under the guise of religion, under the guise of morality. And so we continuously have individuals that don't have the opportunity or anyone ushering them into their authenticity. So Pride Month stands as an opportunity for allies, as an opportunity for members, as an opportunity for those who are questioning their sexuality to know that it is normal. Pride is a way of normalizing who we are and our existence and our contribution to this earth.
Thank you for that. So it is no secret that you are a wonderful member of the community that is 50 plus.
60 plus.
60 plus. So tell me this. Today, it is very different from yesterday.
Mhm.
And as a person who has been around for some time and has seen the development of pride over the years, what would you, as a veteran person, say to a new or freshly out person who wants to identify with the community and be prideful about who they are?
I think it actually starts with yourself, because back in the day, and George, you will know this as well, we had to look to those that were already entrenched in the community for guidance. We had to look to them for the cultivation of culture. And in many instances, that was very sporadic. Many of us became victims to harassment, sexual harassment, victims, you know, because we were not stably housed, victims because we were low income. And so our entrance into this lifestyle was muddied in many instances, you know, by other people, you know, just preying on each other. I think that what pride should stand for is a continuation, the perpetuation, and the curation of culture, our gay culture, And more specifically, and I have to make this distinction, our Black gay culture, because there is still that separation within the LGBTQI and questioning community where there is a color divide. And it just puzzles me that as a microcosm or a sub division of of society, that we still have to splinter, that we still have to split. And so pride should be about continuity. It should be about congealing. It should be about bringing each of us together and celebrating each of us, even within our own community. Our top is a member of community, and simply just that.
Well, thank you. Can't question that.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So, being that we're in Atlanta, and Atlanta has a very huge population when it comes to the LGBTQ plus community, what are some ways that the gap between younger and older generations is being closed? What is being done, or what types of programs or systems are in place to sort of help bridge that gap?
So, there's always that threat of, mentors not necessarily mentoring and mentees not necessarily being menteed, and so it comes down to integrity. It comes down to character. It comes down to the point that we have to intentionally develop and curate who we are and stand for, what we acknowledge as our culture. There is no continuity as far as Black gay culture. There has to be a platform. And so how that's developed is having an intergenerational exchange, because those that were here know what was going on, the Marsha P's. Those that were here understand what the challenges were. We didn't think we'd ever have a Black president. I certainly didn't think that two men could marry. So the benefit of being here throughout all of that is to bear witness to where we come from. And the only way that we can actually move this forward is by preparing the next generation to carry the mantle and to go with the clarion call that we are here, we are not a mistake, and our lives matter.
I'd like to latch on to that if I may. Yeah, I also think that to bridge that gap, we have to understand that the newer generation, and I hate using that word,
right,
but the less experienced generation, because that covers everybody. Let them know that there is a different language that they have. Of course, there's a different grasp on what it means to be LGBTQ, because of course they did not have to experience a lot of the things that more seasoned LGBTQ members, see how I did that, in the past. So it's important that we who are more seasoned not look at the newer generation. I did it again, but it is what it is, and not hold them to such an esteem as we did back in the past, because these young babies, these young kids are very affirmed in who they are. They know the language. They live with a different language. They know what non-binary and genderqueer is, and gender fluid and pansexual and bisexual and asexual and sapiosexual. I just learned those last week. So very different. What pride means to them is totally different than what it meant to us. However, we bridge that gap by understanding that this change has happened and go along with it, but still give that education, as Nathan mentioned earlier.
Yeah, I was going to ask you guys about that. How do you celebrate Pride? And being that looks very different from how it looked when it first began, those celebrations. How do you celebrate Pride?
For me, again, Pride is about understanding who you are. You asked the question earlier, why some people still question why it's a valid celebration. Pride is about living your authentic life. And there are many people, especially in the LGBT community, the transgender community especially, is being ostracized. There's legislation being put in place so that they don't have a rightful place in the community altogether, especially in the African-American community, but at large. And so while some may say it's not necessary, some may say this is, we don't need to have it. Look at what's happening to members of the community. Look how there are young, homeless African-American kids because they have come out to their parents and are thrown out in the street and have nowhere to go. There is a reason that we have to have pride, because there needs to be a language that says, look, this is who we are. We want you to see us, not just validate us, but hear us and give us the same rights that you have. That's what pride is all about. That's what Marsha P. Johnson was fighting for. That's what happened at Stonewall. And that's what continued to happen throughout history. And even in 2022, we are still marching, fighting, rioting in the halls, saying we want our rights. And pride is where that begins.
I am glad that both of you all mentioned Marcia. I wanted one of you, whomever chooses, to, if you care to share just a little bit about why that name is important as it relates to or being associated with pride. Who is Marcia?
George, you want to take it?
I'll take it. Okay. Marsha P. Johnson was an African-American transgender woman. She was at the height and at the moment that Stonewall became the riot. A lot of times she's revered, but when the documentation of that historical event happens, she's erased. So it's important to remember and mention her name as often as possible, because often transgender people are in the forefront of what happens that affects the rest of the LGBTQI plus community. Marsha P. Johnson was one of those advocates and activists who was vocal and said, no more, I'm not going to. And for the rest of you who are behind me, I'm gonna go forward, take the lashes, take the abuse, take the arrest and the names and all of that, and make way for everybody who's following behind me. So Marsha P. Johnson should always be remembered and mentioned. When pride happens, there always should be a tribute to that great Black transgender woman.
And in her time, there were times when she was not even allowed in a Stonewall because she was Black, because she was a trans woman. And this is before we even knew the term transgender. And, you know, and speaking just to lift those individuals up, if we think about gay rights, if we think about same gender loving activism, it's always been, like you said, George, it's always been the courage of the trans women. I really got to say this, you
Yes.
know, how much courage does it take for us to walk down the street and we blend in? How much courage does it take for us when we can hide who we love? When they boldly, oh, I'm getting so emotional, when they boldly stand in place to be ostracized, to be criticized, to be criminalized, to be, you know, marginalized. For us, it's not just for themselves, because they know that they're doing a greater work. And that takes a tremendous amount of courage. And we don't often equate courage with femininity, as we should, because as a Black man, it was my mother that was the strongest member of my family. You know, so femininity does not equal weakness. It equals strength in every sense of the word. And so for our trans sisters, how can we still, in this day and time, put them in situations where they're constantly being harmed, constantly being ostracized, and constantly being shamed? It's a disgrace. So pride should be about looking at where we've come from, but also assessing what we need to do, where we need to go, and how we as a group need to be inclusive. We ask for inclusivity when we are not inclusive ourselves.
Very good.
Within
Sounds
the
like
community.
it sounds like another conversation.
I'm serious.
Totally
It's
different
definitely a whole
conversation.
nother
Exactly.
conversation.
Exactly.
So look, Nathan, let me ask you this, because we definitely are talking about pride, but we're also talking about Men's Health Month. So why is it important for men, especially men who identify with our community, to seek appropriate health care?
Well, one of the reasons is, as Black men and Black gay men, you know, we know that Black men in general don't, you know, have a distrust of the medical field, you know, because of this Tuskegee experiments back in the day. And then also because we are a undercurrent of the main society, many of us, when we go to our doctors, don't talk about our sexuality. So if we're having certain sexual practices that might need to be screened, like anal sex, which, you know, if we're doing things in the anal area could make us
Yeah.
susceptible to different STIs, but more importantly, colon cancer and HPV. So if your doctor doesn't know that what your risk factors are, how can they screen you? And if you can't be screened, how do you know what your body is going through? Men as a whole, Black men are, more susceptible, to prostate cancer. And so we have other issues, high blood pressure, we talk about health disparities, Black individuals as a whole, because of our low poverty rates, because of our diets, because of our lifestyle, we're more prone to more diseases. And so we have to be, we have to manage our life if we want to continue our lives.
I think to piggyback on that, if I may, what's also important as Black men, we have always been reticent to and hesitant to talk about our health complications. If we're having some issues like Townsend mentioned earlier, health-wise, sexual-wise, we're hesitant to do that. Women are raised from the womb, basically, they're going to go get their annual checkups and so forth and so on. Men, if our arm is not falling off, we're not going to the doctor. That's
if they fall off, we try to use crazy.
Exactly. So African-American men need to be very, very vigilant and advocates for their health and understand that this is what this doctor is here for. He's not here to judge you. He's not here to malign you. Hopefully you find the right doctor that can speak to you and you feel comfortable with, and then share that information so that you can live a healthier life. Here at weareyouradio.com, if I may plug for a second.
Go ahead, I love it.
We do have a show that is specifically designed to give information on healthy lifestyle, which is Wellness Wednesday. Happens every Wednesday at 7 a.m. And our host, DB Marshall, covers a host of things from holistic health to mental wellness. Because when we think about going to a doctor, we often just think about our physical health, but going to a doctor in the African-American community should also be for mental health and talking about, talking to a therapist. And that's another issue here in the African-American community. As men, we don't want to admit, I got issues, I got pressures, I got problems. We're supposed to be strong. We're supposed to be masculine. You're supposed to hold on to it. And that's something that holds us back. And we've got to be very careful with that, because not only holding on to all that pressure can mess with you mentally, but it can affect you physically as well. So we've got to get to the place where the language is easier with the doctor that we trust and say, hey, this is what I got going on.
Definitely.
And you know what? We have to create modern day narratives. If you look at all of the different things that are occurring with Black men, it goes back to slavery. We were conditioned to be just physical beings of labor. And so we didn't have identities. We didn't have whole selves. We were just labor. I was born colored. I grew up Negro. I then became Black. Wow. Then I was African American. Then you add gay onto that. Wow. Then you add same gender. So there's so many different identities that we navigate and weave in and out. Sometimes it just gets difficult to know what part of you needs attention, what part of you is lacking, which part of you is hurting, which part of you to celebrate. And so for me, I learned to celebrate Nathan. Nathan is what represents my total self, my Blackness, my gayness, my straightness, my HIV, it's Nathan. And I think that until we become whole within ourselves, that we'll always have these disparities, because we have not been allowed to cry. We have not been allowed to feel or emote. And so we have to reclaim, that which is ours just by virtue of being here as a human being and a member of the human race.
That's a great segue. I would like to reclaim this time because I see we can get very immersed into this conversation, and I want to keep it moving before the time is up. But we're talking about pride and we're talking about men's health. As you guys were talking, one thing really stood out to me. The reason it is so important for us to still talk about pride and men's health is because people, or let's just say gays, in our community, we receive different health care than non-gays. And we have to begin to have those conversations. I was having I had a doctor's appointment, and while at my doctor's appointment, had to get all these lab tests and everything done. And the doctor told me that he also did some STI screenings. So I had to, go and urinate in the cup. No big deal. And that was the extent to his STI testing, because normally that's what men do when they get tested for STIs. Being a African American gay man, our intimacy is set up different. So because of that, more tests have to be done in order to ensure that you don't have STI. So I had a conversation with my doctor. I was like, I am a same gender loving man, so I would like to be screened appropriately for STIs, whether that's oral, whether that's anal, whether that's penile. And that's just sometimes a conversation that is very uncomfortable to have. We have to talk about pride so people can be prideful, so people can become more comfortable with who they are, so they can have real conversations with their healthcare providers and not limit themselves or not rob themselves of a totally successful visit with their doctor. And so GHF is here to just make sure everyone has equitable healthcare. I can never get that word right. Equitable access to healthcare. And so we'll make sure that we are being visible within the community. We are letting everyone know that we are here to help register people for insurance. I am a certified federal health navigator for the marketplace, and my information will be posted in this live. So anyone who would like to reach me can email me or call me from the information that's pinned in here. You guys specifically were invited because you all are identifying members of the community,
Thank
and
you.
because you have very specialized perspectives. Before we end this live, Nathan, I would love for you to tell us a little bit about your community work and what you do specifically with the Ryan White Council, and what the council is for, and how people can volunteer and all
Okay.
that good stuff.
So the Ryan White Planning Council is there to provide governance over the funds that are and the programming that's available from a medical perspective for individuals living with HIV, whether that's housing, whether that's doctor visits, eye care, oral dental care, whether it's advocacy. They have different committees like priorities. Priorities helps to navigate and to dedicate where or predict where the actual funding is going to go. So if you're not at the table, then you're going to eat whatever is served to you. And so as a member of the planning council and as a member of community, you know what the needs are in your community. I was a census worker. When I would go out and do census work, people were saying, well, why are you here? Well, if you want a senior center in your neighborhood or childcare in your neighborhood, the only way to determine those types of things is through the census. It's through letting us know who is inhabiting, that community. What are the needs of that community? And so the planning council is there, just so that we get about $29 million a year under Ryan White. And that's distributed, to all these different agencies that provide care. And so it's a voluntary position. And that's one of the things that we as African Americans don't tend to do is volunteer, because everything for us is money driven. It's about the bag. It's about it's about the purse. But sometimes, the purse is not as important as the mission, as the purpose, as the vision, because we have been successful because of the vision of Martin Luther King, because of the purpose, of other leaders in our community. And so we have to pick up that mantle and say that in order for us to be successful in our community, we have to tithe. Tithing has nothing to do with money. Tithing is about giving 10% of your time, 10% of your gifts, 10% of your efforts to help your community.
Thank you so much for that. I appreciate it. George, you have an awesome radio show.
Thank you. Thank you very much.
And I've had the opportunity and pleasure to come as a guest on your show. So now you are returning the favor. I would love for you to take the opportunity to simply tell the community about the radio station, why it was created, and what are some of the things that you all do.
All right, in the 30 seconds that I have,
I know.
weareyouRadio.com is a 24-hour streaming radio station that you can be heard on our website, wearuradio.com. You can also get our app in your device's store. Look up WERU Radio, all one word. It'll be the app with the rainbow snapping fingers. We give a platform to LGBTQ artists prominently. So artists like Saucy Santana and Lil Nas X and Duran Bernard and some of the artists that you may not be familiar with are interpolated along with Mary J. Blige and Missy Elliott and all of the great contemporary artists that are out there, R&B, hip hop, and soulful music, all combined to create what we call the urban sound of pride. So we hope you support us. We hope if you're a business that you will advertise with us, especially if you're an LGBTQI radio business. And if you're an artist, we'd love to play your music. So you can also go to our website and find out how you can submit that. In the 30 seconds, I will then again give you the time.
Thank you, but we're not going to just end right here. We're going to continue just a little bit longer. But for the sake of time, we did want everyone else. This is a 30-minute session today.
Thank you.
Quickly, George, I would love for you to let us know if you guys are doing anything as a voice. How do you guys promote men's health, since we're talking about Men's Health Month and Pride? How do you guys promote services or resources for the community that they could benefit from, especially health-wise?
Oh, certainly. Whenever an organization reaches out to us, especially, we make a seat at the table. Our doors are always open to community-minded organizations that especially want to reach out to the LGBTQI community. So like, GHF and other organizations that have come, we sit there, we talk about it, get the information out. We also distribute it on our YouTube pages and other social media platforms. Because again, as I mentioned earlier, radio is a communication system that African-American people gravitate to, have always for years.
And trust.
Yes, and trust, exactly. So I know it is my job, not only as a radio station to but to be for a community that needs information quickly and succinctly and in a way that they can, digest. So that's what we do radio. So especially our health comes forward and wants to, hey, you're invited.
Right. Thank you guys for joining us today for this conversation. Everyone who's watching, as we're talking about pride and we're talking about men's health, it is very, very important to make sure that you are seeing a healthcare provider for your physical care, but also send a mental health provider for your mental and emotional care as well. In the chat, we will have several resources that we researched earlier for the LGBTQIA plus community. Safe, engaged with and reported to be very community oriented and very friendly. Looking for resources for healthcare providers or even some social places or even some mental health resources, then some of those resources will be pinned in the chat. Are there specific resources that either of you would like to highlight?
So I just recently joined NASM, NAESM, which is an national organization that promotes health for Black gay men plus. And we provide sexual health screenings. We provide STI screenings. We have HIV testing. All of it is free. We also have behavioral health and support groups for younger gay individuals.
That's actually one of the resources that we pinned in the chat. So that's great. Thanks for highlighting that.
No fair, you cheated. No.
We're starting a great relationship with NASM, so I'm very excited about that relationship. Are there any specific resources you'd like to highlight, George?
I would just, again, go to our website. We have a whole list of different organizations that are available. What I want to point out is that mental health is my number one thing. It's very important to me. So reach out if you're considering looking for a therapist. Make sure the therapist speaks the language that's important to you. You have to audition the therapist, but it's so vital for us right now. We're 2 years out of a pandemic and still dealing with a whole lot of loss and turmoil. Your mental health is important. Take care of that.
Yes, and that is why you need insurance, community. And That is what I am here for, to help you register for marketplace insurance. Many people think that they cannot be covered or that they cannot afford insurance. I beg to differ. So we highly encourage and urge you to contact me or our other navigator, which you can find on our website, and let us help you navigate through the process of applying for and receiving information for insurance and also getting your applications approved. It's very, very crucial that we take care of our mental and physical health, and having insurance allows us to do that. And that's what the navigators are here for. And thank you for joining us for this conversation on pride and men's health. This could go on and on and on. So what I did forget to mention in first beginning is that this is going to be a series of conversations amongst different panelists talking about this topic, because we can approach it from so many directions, and we have so much information that we can discuss that we could not possibly do it in a 30-minute segment. So again, thank you, Nathan. Thank you, George, for joining us today as we talk about pride and men's health. Go to the resources in the chat, and if you guys need to contact me specifically, get my email and my phone number from the chat, and I will definitely help you register for insurance. And thank you guys again for joining us, and I appreciate you.
You're welcome.
Thank
All
you.
right, y'all have a good one.
You too.